Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to Tapcaf Transmissions after a long hiatus. We are finally back and ready to talk some more Star Wars. I am one of your hosts, Corey, joined as usual by the other host, Mr.
What's
Justin
my name again?
EckhartsLadder.
It's been so long. Oh, thanks for the reminder. Um, yeah, it's what was it? 3 weeks, 2 weeks that we took off?
We've missed two, well, not really missed. I think we had 2 weeks without an episode, so it's been three
No, it was
weeks.
more, wasn't it? Because
Did we miss two for your vacation? And then did we cancel last week because you were sick?
or no, we didn't cancel.
Yeah, I think it
This is the
was.
yeah, it was just 2 weeks because I left on the 2 Thursdays ago, then got back last Thursday. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so
So
yeah,
it's
two
been
2 weeks missed.
it's been 3 weeks. Like if you count all the
Yeah,
days, it's been 21 days.
yeah,
But only two episodes that we've missed. So it's
yeah.
not. It could be worse.
I thought you were gonna go like full rent and like
It's
say how many
been.
minutes and yeah. Oh, you were going,
I
what
was
is
gonna
that,
go
Bare
bare
Naked
naked ladies
Ladies? Yeah.
instead, but
Okay. It's been, I do that sometimes, and Kelsey just hates it. Like, there was a while where, like, she would just be walking, and I'd go, it's been, and it would just really, really affect her emotionally. So that's
yeah,
why I kept doing it.
she's wrong. But I can see where she's coming from.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
for those of you who are watching on the video version of this podcast, you'll notice that Eck has been replaced by his usual Doge for this week. He vomited all over the room right before we started, and it's kind of we didn't want to put you through that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the just vomit, tears, and feces everywhere.
So the
I know
Rangers
you.
game is going really poorly, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's going really poorly. But yeah, I did catch COVID as well, but thankfully it was like at the perfect time. So as we mentioned, I went on vacation for a week. I left 2 Thursdays ago, kind of right when we would have filmed or recorded. We were planning on recording, but I just got way, way, way too busy.
Yeah,
And
we were
then
gonna pre-record, but then you would have had to read the book before going, and we would have had to work
yeah,
out a day. It ended up not working out as well as we were hoping.
yeah. Anyone who's like does YouTube kind of knows that vacations are kind of a double-edged sword. Like on one hand, it's really nice getting to go away for a week, but like the amount of preparation work you need to
Yeah,
do like ends up giving you like 2 really stressful weeks at least.
yeah. It's like how Charlie's got to be planning a vacation coming up because since I've met him, he's been talking about how he's going to use this day to get ahead. And
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the book wasn't possible. And then I got back from my trip and we got COVID. I don't think we actually got it from traveling. I think we got it from my son's school
mm,
because irresponsible parents, basically.
children are just
Um,
like disease vectors. That's all they are.
yeah, and of course they've totally been fine. There was one day where they were like a bit, man, like they both have it too. I'm pretty sure he definitely does. She's a little too young to put through the test, especially where she almost certainly has it. But yeah, they've been pretty much fine. I was a bit banged up for a couple days, not like like actually like, oh, I'm gonna have to go to the hospital or anything. Just like it's a really shitty cold, is
Right.
what we felt like. But my wife and I were also double vaxxed and boosted, so not too bad for us. Still very unpleasant, but today is like the first day or the second day where I'm like pretty much back to normal. So a bit more of a bit more isolation than back into the real world, which would be nice.
Well, force some downtime after your vacation. You get to take the post vacation to vacation a little bit.
Yeah, except I've kind of wanted to like throw the kids like at a grandparent or something, and that this has affected my ability to do
Yeah,
that. But
that's
yeah,
just a good way to kill grandparents.
yeah, exactly. And actually, my parents they actually left to go on they do a trip to Jamaica every year, and they left kind of right as we were returning. So yeah,
So
this has been
you
a
didn't line that up. Yeah.
no, and I'm like, I don't know how my dad's doing because he's a huge hockey fan. And I'm like, Dad, you're missing the playoffs. And then, like, of course, every night he's like in his, they rent a condo. And of course, every night he's like yeah, mom's out at the beach and I'm watching hockey.
Is
Like
he
that's
a Rangers guy too, or is he got a
no,
different team?
he's a Leafs fan.
Oh, the poor
So
guy.
it's sad too because I've been looking forward to like watching hockey with him all year, and then there have been times during the pandemic or whatever where I've had to miss it, and I've been like looking forward to watching the playoffs, and then he's gone, and like the Leafs are so questionable. Like he'll be back for round two, but the Leafs may not be. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
very
spoiler:
sad.
the Leaves won't be, but
Yeah, exactly.
we've had some big Star Wars news come out over the last
Mm,
few days. We've had, of course, some Lego Star Wars DLC that's released. Some really good,
yeah.
some a little bit underwhelming. Uh,
Yeah, what are your thoughts on those? Have you tried them all out?
the lack of voiceovers in all of them is pretty
Mm,
disappointing. But
yeah,
I bought this, I guess, season pass, whatever it was called, the
yeah, me
character
too.
pack. So I've
Deluxe
got all
server.
of them. I haven't actually played with the most recent ones yet, but
The
like the
Ahsoka one,
Ahsoka
this
one looks really
Ahsoka's
good.
really good. Yeah, I think that it's a bit frustrating too because I understand they're very cheap packs. I think they're $2.99 American,
Hmm.
$3.99 Canadian. Um, so it's like I understand maybe you can't get Ashley Eckstein or whoever to do Ahsoka, but for like the Bad Batch especially, like you had the voice actor in for them like already having to record a bunch of lines. It would have been nice if they just taken the extra time to, get some stuff recorded in advance.
Yeah, I'd wonder there if it's more of an issue with localization. Like they wouldn't want to commit to
Yeah,
doing the localization
it's
for
possible.
everything, so it just made more sense to keep it consistent from the start and not have it. Like obviously, I'd still prefer that they do it, but I don't think it was just like the kind of thing where it's no
Yeah.
one thought of it. There must be
It
some kind of
it's
reason, even
it's
if it
just
is
weird
disappointing.
because like I agree. It's just like a little bit strange that the premium characters like the Bad Batch or like all the Mandalorian, all these characters are kind of less fleshed out than like
Yeah.
really strange like pod racers from episode one, like have full voices. Max Rebo has a full voice, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And as he should,
Okay.
but
Full
yeah.
voice and extra limbs.
hmm Oh, by the way, I do want to, on that note, some of you who listened to the YouTube stream last time may have noticed that my our first foray into the Glup Shido. What was the name of the official
Oh,
thing?
the Glup Shadow Appreciation Award or something.
Yeah, so we started this new thing every day or every podcast where we cover a new character. And what happened last episode is my I lost my notes. I just straight up lost my notes. So
rather
that's
rather
why.
than just like put it off, no one knew this was coming, so rather than just like put it off
Well,
for the
no,
next
I had my
episode.
notes at the beginning of the stream though when we talked about it. So, but anyway, if you did, you might want to go check out the audio recording of the podcast because I actually went through. I found my notes again, re-recorded what I was supposed to have, um, a little less shitty. And of course, guys, just a reminder too. I'm saying this as we're getting a little off track at the beginning here. Every episode now, we do have timestamps on the podcast, so if you want to go straight to the Glup Shido appreciation, or if you really want to go back and listen to something or skip ahead through our intro, use the timestamps. They're pretty detailed as well.
And the Glup Shadow Appreciation Award will be returning next week. And that did
Next week,
you?
okay.
Okay, so you didn't prepare one off on
Well,
vacation.
it's your turn
Yeah.
this time.
Well, yeah. So all the regular segments, our one regular segment we've done once, will be coming back next time.
Well, you don't
Uh,
have one for this week?
no, I didn't. I didn't even know for sure if we were going to be able to do the
Oh, okay,
podcast tonight
okay. Oh,
until
yeah, okay.
yesterday
Fair
afternoon
enough.
because
No, fair
you
enough.
might have been dead.
Yeah,
Then I
no,
would
it's
have
true.
researched an obscure Star Wars character for nothing.
I mean, it could have been a video. Listen, I could still die as well, so
You could.
I mean,
We,
so could
we
anybody.
could only hope.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's also the Kenobi trailer that came out. Uh,
Yep.
we got to see Uncle Owen give it
Mm-hmm.
to Obi-Wan a little bit, but we're
Yeah.
only
Owen
like
was
3 weeks
inc-
away.
yeah, it feels like it's sneaking right up on. I've seen like a lot of complaints from people on Reddit. Surprise, surprise, about how Disney's mishandling the marketing. Like I think Disney very much knows what they're doing with Kenobi. They just always have some show running that they're kind of
Yeah.
cautious about, like kneecapping their own
Yeah, like
like
the
marketing.
last episode for How I Met Your Father only just went up this week on Disney Plus, so they needed to make sure that was out of the way. Unless there was something else you're talking about in that space.
Is that actually a Disney? Is that a thing?
It's
And
I think it's from Star, so it's part of
oh,
Disney
okay,
Plus. Like the
interesting.
streaming release for it is through that. But
Okay.
yeah, so
Well, Moon Knight is the
yeah.
smaller one. But yeah, so I imagine we're gonna start seeing a lot more stuff. Probably, maybe not much more in the way of trailers, but just kind of a more consistent marketing presence now that Moon Knight has sort of wrapped up.
It's kind of weird to me because like I don't know what people want. Like I
Yeah.
understand if there's no trailers for something that's really soon out, and then it's like, okay, what are they doing? But like we've had
Hmm.
2 trailers for Kenobi, we've had a couple teasers. Why would
Yeah,
you want more than that for a TV show? Like, do you want to see all the like
I
people
agree.
already complain about stuff being too spoiled beforehand,
Hmm.
and like it's not like people don't know that Kenobi is coming out.
Yeah, especially where it's a mini series. It's 6 episodes. Like, yeah, I agree. And it's also not the thing where I'm honestly not really that concerned with it being. I think it's going to be huge. I don't. People are saying it's going to be bigger than the Mandalorian. I think people are wrong about that. And maybe overestimating the reach of Kenobi. I do think that it's going to be big, and but there's not going to be a season 2. I really don't think there's going to be a season
No,
2. So I'm not too
there
caught
is.
up
It's called A
on.
New Hope, but
Yeah, exactly. I'm not too caught up on how well the show is going to do. I'm just excited for it. Um, it's also one of those shows where like I've not been spoiled at all on anything. Like I'm excited. It's going to be good.
well, I mean the trailers we've had have spoiled what seem to be pretty big parts of the show already, just with the 2 we've
Hmm.
had. And I don't think we've mentioned it on the podcast before. We might have talked about it a bit last time, but
Hmm.
I know a lot of people do want to avoid spoilers and trailers and stuff. So maybe we'll save that for either right at the
Yeah.
end if we want to talk about it, or like right before Kenobi comes out. We'll have a segment at the end of that episode, whichever is right before Kenobi comes out, and talk about it a bit there. But
Yeah. The only thing I want to say about the trailer is I don't think we really need to break down the trailer a whole lot. Maybe
no.
we can do a special before the show comes out. The only thing I want to say is I'm really excited after the trailer for the introduction of one of the new characters. I believe her name is Riva. Um, one of the new. Yeah, I won't even say what her role is, but she speaks in the trailer, and she sounds great, and I'm really excited for
Yeah.
her. Yeah.
It looked like there are a few decent villain characters coming with this, which is always
Hmm.
fun because we don't really have a lot of that in the shows yet. Like we got it with
Yep.
Moff Gideon,
Hmm.
but there hasn't been as much of that yet. Maybe some Forlom for Zuckus.
Yeah,
Anyways,
I feel a bit frustrated when it comes to like major characters. The one that I wish we got more of for villains is
Max
uh
Rebo.
yeah, he's always killing his
He
clients.
causes explosions everywhere. You think he's
He
not a
does.
fucking villain?
No, I agree. Well, I mean, a villain, yeah, I guess maybe. I mean, I hope we learn about his fate after Book of Boba Fett. He wasn't there. Hopefully, he wasn't just in the bathroom or something. But I liked Commander Pride from Episode
From Ep
9. That
Nine,
was
yeah.
Yeah, he was really cool, and I really like the actor. So I kind of hope maybe we see if we ever have it, because I assume he was spending most of the time. I don't know if he was a First Order guy or like an Exegol guy, but it'd be cool to get some more of him at some point.
Yeah, I assume like with any more stories that come out in that period, which they do seem to still be doing, we'll hopefully
Hmm.
get a bit more on the Exegol background,
Hmm.
especially if some of the elements from like the Mandalorian do end up
Yep.
feeding into that, which they may,
Yep.
may not, but
Yep. Yeah. Any other really big news? I'm trying to think. There's been pretty. I've heard from a lot of people, and there's been rumors that there's going to be a Star Wars Vision season 2, which I personally am all for. I thought Visions was great. I didn't like every short, but I really liked the fact that the shorts existed.
yeah,
We both really liked the Ronin book. Did you give it that an A?
It was up there for me. I'm not
Yeah.
sure exactly. I think A is right.
I think I might have even given it an S or very close to an S. Really liked that book. So more kind of diverse storytelling would be great. Other than that, I don't think there was a whole lot. There was a couple episodes of the Halo show. I'm 3 episodes behind now.
Me too. I don't think I've stayed caught up since our last discussion of it.
So
Mostly
I
just from
heard,
not having a chance to, but
yeah, I heard that the last episode, like the most recent one, today's, I guess, was awful, and the past 2 were kind of the best yet. So kind of excited to get caught up on that. I watched like the the episode after the one we talked about had like this big action scene, and I watched that in the airport waiting in line for Starbucks because it came out when I was on my way for my trip. So that was a good little bit of diversion. But yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot else to talk about before we get into the novel, unless there's something you want to mention.
no, there's been the news that there's a new Star Wars game in development, but
Oh yeah.
it doesn't seem like it's a traditional game, so
Mm.
it was a bit vague on that. So there's really not much we know about it. So what was the project? Was it a 1313 developer?
No,
It
it
was a
was
canceled
Project.
game,
It was called Project Ragtag.
right?
It is going to be a traditional game. It's just I think it's going to be well, the Project Ragtag. It's hard to say because if it is kind of a new take on that, that was basically like supposed to be I think like a linear sort of Uncharted style game.
Well, the
Um,
only press release we've gotten for it was like a interactive storytelling experience integrating elements of
is that what it said?
which,
Okay.
yeah, like it, which could easily just be kind
Yeah.
of corporate PR speak for not giving too much
Hmm.
away at the start, and it ends
Yeah.
up being a game because like that's been the case with other things that have had those announcements before. But
Yeah.
it could also be more like the old Zelda CD-ROM games and the Mario ones that were very
Hmm.
weird. Well, like ski that one.
Yeah. I wonder what's for dinner.
Yeah. That's just
This
what came to my
sword is what
mind when
all
I was
true
reading
warriors
the thing.
strive for. Yeah.
But anyways, let's move on to our third New Jedi Order book. We've talked about Vector Prime. We've talked
Hmm.
about Dark Tide Onslaught, but now it's time for what everyone's been waiting for, Dark Tide Ruin. And the
Hmm.
Ruin refers to Ithor. See, you got to pay attention to the book to really pick up on those clues, but that's what it
Yeah.
is. And the Dark Tide is actually the Yuuzhan Vong War effort.
Or Eligos Akla's day. His day was ruined.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
So okay. So yeah, this one basically picks off pretty much right after Dark Tide 1. What did you think of this book overall? Was this kind of up there with enjoyment for the last one? Did you like it more or less? What's kind of your thoughts?
For some reason, I was struggling to get into this one
Yeah.
as much, even just after reading the prior one. I'm really
Mhm.
not sure what it was, uh, but I do enjoy Corrin as a character a lot, so I always like having him around.
Yeah.
But it's almost like the ending of the last book of Onslaught and the first half or so of this book kind of dragged together, and
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. There are parts of this book that are really good. I like that the Imperial Remnant is now kind of being introduced, although, they're very whitewashed in a way.
yeah,
This does do the kind of X-Wing thing where it's like everything is about Corrin. Corrin is, which it's not necessarily bad, but I don't know if everything here necessarily suits the story super well, especially the ending, where basically Corrin is kind of sent off and he's the new Jedi Order kind of disassociates themselves from him
yeah,
because of his involvement with the duel against Shadow Shy. And that's just like that felt like some of the bad parts of the X-Wing novels to me, I guess.
yeah,
As does the fact that it's always Corrin in a valiant stand. He's always mortally injured, but just manages to pull through. Some of that's good,
yeah.
but I felt 2 books in a row of kind of that was maybe a little bit much, especially where the first book, one thing that I really liked is that we got a really broad view of the war. We
Mhm.
had Leia, who was almost totally absent from this book, besides for a few mentions. We've got Luke, we've got others, and all these plot threads are kind of handled well. So the Corrin stuff is not too overwhelming, and I've never really felt Corrin, to be a bit much. But in this book, all the focus on him, and kind of Corrin's putting the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders again, it was almost a bit much.
Yeah, like in the X-Wing books, the fact that so much of it is from Corrin's perspective, even though they
Mhm.
are quite important events, doesn't really detract from anything because it's like you're seeing this perspective of this guy. But
Mhm.
in NJO, when so much has to connect,
Yeah.
it some of the ways that it gets centered on Corrin feel a little bit jarring. In the way, like in the first book, having him as kind of a lens to see the like Jedi schism through really works. But in
Mhm.
here, uh, some of those differences, because Ganner is basically the character on the opposite side of that riff from Corrin that we get the most of. But by the end of the last book and by the start of this book, he's kind of all on board the Corrin Horn
Mhm.
is awesome train. And the way Corrin does get sent away at the end, so basically, the Yuuzhan Vong discover that Ithor could be a big problem for them because the trees of Ithor have a pollen that basically all their stuff is allergic to. So
Mhm.
Corrin, the Vong are going there. Corrin and the New Republic, along with the Imperials, head there as well, and they're trying to figure out how they can buy some time to get refugees off the planet. So Corrin challenges Shido Shai, the Vong commander, to a duel where he basically says, "I'll give you the bones of your ancestors that were on Bimiel from the prior book. If
Mhm.
you win and if I win, we get to keep Ithor." And so even though Corrin wins, the Vong go back on their word because none of them really cared what Shido Shai had to say, anyways.
Mhm.
And Corrin ends up getting blamed for this. And I can see it would be somewhat realistic for him to be scapegoated like that.
Yeah.
But the book never really. It seems like the book is going further in the direction of people blaming Corrin and not even really having the characters acknowledge that it doesn't really make any sense. Just that because the debate ends up being that was Corrin right or wrong to take Ethor's fate in his hands, but he wasn't even offering
Mhm.
up Ethor. He was offering up the
Yeah, exactly.
bones, and he could have saved Ethor. But it's felt by the end more like Michael Stackpole just didn't want to let other people write Corrin for the rest of the series.
Yeah, and it's kind of it. We see some similar aspects, or I guess a similar thing in like the old X-wing novels as well. It's not Corrin, but there are several characters who are scapegoated. Um, Most notably, what's his
Tycho.
name? Tycho. That's slightly different situation, but kind of a
Yeah.
similar thing where it's someone who we know is good, and he's largely being attacked by the unreasonable masses. I just it the there were just a few things I guess about how Corrin centered this was that bothered me. That was one, and the Elagos Akla thing was another. Like I actually forgot that Elagos Akla was in iJedi and that they had that relationship. But to me, Corrin is not the one who I think of as having a close relationship with him. I think more of Leia. Um,
Yeah.
so I guess it just felt a bit. I guess it just felt a bit forced to have the whole Elagos Akla, his death and everything about that be so core and focused when I really felt like, Elagos Akla was a lot more to a lot of people rather than just kind of, um, how he's portrayed in these two novels, which I actually did feel was a little bit off of how his character felt, like the Thrawn duology and some other stuff.
I don't know. Like I was fine with most of how he was used here. I do wish we got a bit more of Leia's reaction to it because,
Hmm.
his relationship with Korn and I Jedi was definitely super important. Like
Hmm.
his relationship with Leia was also really important
Yeah.
uh, in the Thrawn duology, but also that it gets alluded to a few times, and
Yeah.
she's the two of them are such a tight pair, even in just the opening of the other two books
Hmm.
so far.
Yeah. That's
That
what was surprising.
when Leia like she gets acknowledged as being there. She has the meeting with Pelion at the start, and then she is acknowledged as being at Tifonda Bay or
Hmm.
with the New Republic commanders, and
Hmm.
just there we don't really get anything from her, and that does feel like a kind of underused part of
Yeah,
this
I just thought
duology.
Leia was kind of weird in this book, just in general, because she's actually there for a lot of it. And there's even a few scenes where she's kind of like her presence is felt somewhat, but like
Yeah.
she's never, you get nothing from her perspective. You don't really get very much in terms of like dialogue from her. Um, and I just feel like, especially where the kids are going through a lot right now and Han is away, like it would have been nice to kind of get maybe some of her like motherly touch for parts of the novel.
Well,
But
Han's trying to have a drink with the kids.
yeah,
How old are
don't
they?
make me
Like
drink them.
16 and it's
Yeah,
25, 26 ABY.
yeah.
So they'd be 16, 17 for the older ones, and Anakin's 15. And like the drinking
Don't
age
make
is
me
probably
drink on
lower.
my
And
own.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's probably they're probably above the legal drinking age in Star Wars. It's probably not like the States, but it's
Hmm.
just that's where Han immediately goes. So
Yep. I
we
guess
do
we do
have
get a bit of just to be fair too. We do get some Leia stuff at the very beginning, just as I'm thinking.
we do, but like that's just going to talk to Pelion.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Some of that also fits into another thing that I think is a little overdone in this book, which is the whole like no one actually has any material disagreements with the Empire. It's not about the fact that they're overcoming their differences for the
Hmm.
sake of fighting the Vong because it's necessary. It's that like any historical slights are actually imagined, and there should be no barriers to their cooperation on this.
Yeah. Despite the fact that like one interesting way they could have done that is, well, the Empire are fascists and they're definitely not individualists, so like they probably wouldn't give a shit about Ithor's weird planetary traditions. You know what I mean? So like that could have been a sticking point between Pelion and the New Republic. That could have been interesting because you're right. Like they're basically just. It's almost like, oh yeah, they're brothers who you know
Yeah.
they fight sometimes, but they love each other in
I
the
don't
end.
even think Pelion would need to object that strongly to like honoring the Ithorian traditions before they're able to do anything. Like he already has a few
Hmm.
things with how Korn wants to deal with it, saying like, "Oh, this would never fly with us."
Yeah, you're right.
But if that's what happens, that's what happens. But like the opposition to them working together, like the issues that some people would have, are put entirely up to being unreasonable and power hungry, like Borsk. Like
Hmm.
there are a few times where it's not even that the problems go unmentioned, which would be probably fine because it suits the story that it's about them coming together or whatever. But there's
Hmm.
a few places where it kind of goes out of its way to say like any of the issues anyone had with the Empire were just imagined.
Yeah, when like even the like and there's one moth who's like seen as being particularly like pragmatic compared to some of the other ones, and I will say that is something that I kind of remember like Legacy of the Force doing a bit better, where like Pelion is trying to like get a hold of all of these moths who are like just they're just a different breed than like those in the GA. And they want different things. And I think that like that series handles the Empire a little bit better than they've been handled so far in this. Where like, yeah, there are fundamental disagreements, even when political goals are somewhat aligned. Um, and yeah, like even the one like Zoomer Imperial who's like, yeah, I wasn't even really alive when Palpatine was around. Like there's still a fundamental difference between the Empire and it's like fundamental and like it's like a key philosophical aspect of Star Wars. Like the Empire is a fascist, like dictatorial government, and like Star Wars' whole message is that that is bad. So I think you got to be careful when you're handling them, and kind of like you're explaining, um, making it seem like any disagreements we had were more imagined than anything else.
Yeah, like we have enough examples of Pelion being like he's not an out and out humans are better than aliens, but like he definitely has some issues with aliens getting power or having to work with them in prior books, or at least
Mm-hmm.
he commiserates with other people saying, hey, this sucks that we have to do this. But in
Mm-hmm.
this, like, Trace just goes out of his way, apropos of nothing, to say, "Hey, Pelion, it's clear you don't hate aliens." Even though, like, his introductory scene is him
He's like,
talking about
actually,
how weird Rook is, and
yeah,
at the start of Vision of the Future, like, yeah, Rook is creepy, but at the start of Vision of the Future or Spectre of the Past, there's the Moffs that he's talking to, and they're like, "Ah, consorting with aliens. Who would have thought the Empire would come to this?"
yeah,
Rather than Pelion saying, "Hey, we need to work with them to move forward." Which,
mm-hmm.
like, at least that'd be one way to dodge it. But like, he gets
Mm-hmm.
so much credit as like, oh no, he actually stopped the anti-alien bias in the Empire. He didn't even say that. He just said like, oh yeah, it does suck that these aliens are around so much.
Yeah, fuck the aliens. Actually, yeah. What would you give for about 10,000 rooks running around now? Because the Nogri are like pretty much everyone in this. They're getting slaughtered outright as well. They're trying, they really are, and they're somewhat effective. But I mean, yeah,
They just they keep getting their asses handed to them in these two
yeah,
books.
yeah. The books like go to their way to just like they're just getting like effortlessly annihilated. Like
Yeah,
the one almost gets killed by in the first book. I think one's like he's thrown or he's. It's just like
yeah. Bulpor shows up. I think he's introduced in the first book and dies. Then he
yeah.
gets mentioned once in the first Dark Tide book where his name is spelled wrong. And there are two that are introduced in this that I don't think are ever mentioned again as Leia's two new guards.
Well, one does die in this book, doesn't he? I think
One of the ones
they.
in the strike team,
The strike team. Yeah. Okay.
that's with like Korn and Ganner, the one who says, "Yeah, and if you want to get to the Jedi," or no, I actually don't think it's that one.
I think it is that one because he
It's
charges
one of the
with them.
six.
Yeah, and until we get Cacmain and Meewall, not that interested
Yeah.
because like those are the ones
Kabarak,
that's
Kabarak, Meewall, and Kak. They're
yeah,
the only
the
ones
ones
that.
that really stick around for
Yeah,
like I think Cacmain and Meewall are there for like pretty much all of Legacy of the Force and Fate of the Jedi, if I remember correctly.
I
So
think at least one of them is around before now as well. Like, is Kabarak
okay,
not around
yeah,
at some point in
isn't
Vision of the
Kabarak?
Future?
I don't. Yeah, I don't know.
But like these two, Olmok and Baskbakan, never hear of them again.
Have you ever watched The Office?
Yeah,
That scene where Dwight turns around and like Angela's standing there and she's like really short and he looks over and he's like, ugh.
yeah,
That's what I imagine
that's
like
Pelion and Rook.
every Ogre is like they just turn around, this like short little thing is just staring at you from like with just like no sense of like just so like no social sense at all. It's like
Yeah,
Jesus Christ, especially because they're so silent. Yeah, good stuff.
or Nogri. They've been through so much.
I love them too. I really do. But
Corin's solution, I think it's Corin, his solution to the war of like, do you think we can convince the Vong to take some Nogri bodyguards? That could work.
yeah, could have. Um, Actually, speaking of that, there's one thing they do in this book that is really smart, and that I really remembered. It really stuck with me when I read it way back, whenever the first time or the second time. That's the scene with the bunker. And it's something that they kind of touch on. Obviously, the Vong hate technology. What the New Republic does is they basically load a bunker. It's a fake bunker, like it's a fake fortification full of these barely functional droids, knowing that it's going to infuriate the Yuuzhan Vong, who of course rush the bunker, which is filled with explosives. Um, I thought that was really clever, and I kind of wish maybe they do, and I just don't remember. But that's something I'd like to see the series play with a lot. Obviously, you get the YVH droids somewhat that are kind of built around that idea. That was a fun little moment, I thought.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I think the NJO does really well overall is the actual methods of warfare evolving and like
Mm-hmm.
the tricks that each side kind of does.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, like it does evolve over time, and it's less just like, oh, here's this line of ships versus this line of ships.
Yeah.
And especially the stuff that plays on the fact that they don't really understand each other. They don't really operate on the same uh just fundamental level, and that's what Elagos
Hmm.
is kind of looking into. So
Hmm.
the fact that we're starting to see them take advantage of that on each side is one of the more interesting parts of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we even get like that's one thing I like too that this book does really well, or this series does really well rather. And it is a function of having a well planned out series with kind of these writers all tackling the same war. Like you mentioned, not only do you get the evolution of warfare, but you also kind of know how battles are going to play out. There's a good sense of what the sides are working with. Whereas, like in an old Bantam era book, where especially like if they're a couple years apart, the scale of the universe feels completely different. Like you don't know whether it's going to be starfighters that change the day, whether a star destroyer is as powerful as 10 Mon calamari cruisers or one. You know what I mean? Whereas this, I really like that they've kind of set up these really key features of the Vong armada,
Yeah.
the fleet, especially the Dovin Basils, kind of so far have worked pretty much like you'd expect them to. We'll get the war coordinators more later on, and they end up kind of being big. And yeah, that's just it's a nice thing that it helps with the feeling of continuity, I
Yeah.
think. And like you said in this book, we get the advancement where the New Republic had been sort of stuttering their lasers, these little low power shots. The Vong have started to evolve with that, so now the big capital ships are responding by firing off these really powerful volleys, which are able to kind of counteract the lower shielding that the Vong are using to deal with the sort of saturation fire, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and how they're like detonating the torpedoes before they get absorbed. So like it might not do the full damage of impacting it, but it's still at least getting something out there.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's a lot of little evolutions like that. And as much as it may seem like Alagos's journey to understand the Vong doesn't come to much here and ends up with him dying,
Mhm.
like both sides are kind of gaining from that. And it kind of it hints to what some elements of the ultimate resolution of the war will be, aside from just getting a giant planet to come and take away the surviving ones. But like,
Which absolutely does happen.
yeah, like Shidao Shai is the only one who realizes, like, oh, I've learned enough about them to understand like what's going on with this bunker. Aside from him just being like
Yeah.
smarter than your average Chazric slave, but the the different roles of the way the Yuuzhan Vong society is structured, and the fact that there's not such fundamental differences between them as individuals, and like there are still people within Yuuzhan Vong society who it doesn't benefit, and like the shamed ones do ultimately start cooperating with the New Republic, even
Yeah.
if they're under Na Maenor's leadership for most of that, because he just wants power back. But like what Elagos kind of starts the ball rolling on does become a
Mhm.
big factor in how we explore the war going forward, especially after Star by Star.
Yeah, part of the problem is that Shade Out Shy is like he's one of even compared well, especially compared to like No Minor, who is fairly pragmatic. He's willing to take a I think it's a Y wing or an A wing at one point. Shade Out Shy is like the complete opposite, where he's a total zealot.
Yeah.
Um so he respects a lot of what Elagos Akla does because to be honest, it's simply because their kind of philosophies line up on certain things. Elagos Akla is very brave. But Shadao Shai is like the most crazy Vong we've seen so far. He's totally into you know the pain aspect of their religion. He's always spending time in the embrace of pain.
Mhm.
He's inflicting the most kind of brutal injuries on himself. He's always popping bones out or putting his fingers through his hand, like pretty gruesome stuff. Um,
But he's also the
whereas,
first one we see that like grasps that they are operating in a different way and tries
yeah,
to understand what that actually means for them. Like
yes,
he's using it just because he wants it as a way to actually
hmm,
inflict what he wants on them.
yeah,
But he does kind of open that door a little bit.
yes. And I mean, I guess all of this, we also get a bit of a look into the actual philosophy of like, I think this is probably the first rationale. Maybe we've gotten a little before now of why they kind of embrace pain like they do. Does
Yeah.
that work? Does it work for you or no?
Not really. Like the
Yeah, me neither.
yeah,
And it's a
the
big
way it all
thing, and
just
it sucks because the Vong are they're an interesting enemy, and it's a fun series of novels. But so many people are, I think, fairly put off by the fact that they're essentially like the edgiest aliens possible.
well, I
Um,
think it gets better in Trader. Like I think Trader does a much better job of laying out
mhm.
what's going on there, and it should because it's got like the entire book is just about that.
Yeah.
Whereas here, it's our first look uh at that element of them, or the first attempt we see anyone from the galaxy of like trying to figure out what's going on here. So
Mhm.
I don't think it's necessarily a shortcoming that it doesn't make sense yet. It's like part
Yeah, no, I
of
think
the
that's
intent
fair.
is that they remain like even if you do get that little bit of a glimpse into what they're trying to go
Mhm.
for, like there's still
Mhm.
supposed to be such an alien force that
Yeah.
is yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. It's just a lot of people don't get that far, partially because
Yeah.
they see the Vong as these weird, you know, sadomasochists. And so right now the kind of explanation they give, and I think that Vong society gets very interesting, especially with what do they call it again? The like cortex of knowledge, or what
Yeah,
do they
like
call?
it's the cortex, like the eighth cortex and then the ninth
Yeah,
cortex
I,
doesn't
I really
exist and
like
all.
that stuff, and I like how like turns out that a lot of it's just bullshit. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
but a lot of people would read kind of the existence is pain and life is pain, and that's the only constant. So we've got to rip our arms out of our shoulders and do all these things. A lot of people would read this, get this far, and kind of just tap out because they think
Yeah.
it's stupid.
Well, there
And
are even hints so far of like these are the warriors that we're seeing. Like
yes,
the shapers even get kind of
yeah,
poo
the
pooed
sh-
by Shadow Shy that
and the shapers and the priests,
yeah.
right?
And the
And
Praetorate Vong is the politicians. Like if you're a
yeah,
politician from anywhere in this, no
yeah,
matter what
fucking
you're doing, unless you're getting turned into a bone stew, then your name is shit.
unless you're small government flat tax Mara Jade. But yeah, um, yeah, fuck politicians for sure. um, yeah, so it'd be interesting to see kind of how kind of the Vong side is further kind of elaborated on in more novels, because this is the most we see of them as of this point. We get a bit from the Vong infiltrator on an Exgal. We get a bit from Nome Nor, who I think is probably one of the most interesting Yuuzhan Vong, especially the way his story ends, which we'll try not to talk about too much yet. But yeah, this is the most perspective we get this whole novel, and it's definitely interesting.
Yeah. So again, that'll be something that we get into a lot more once Jason gets taken prisoner. Like that is
Hmm.
99% of Traitor, which I think is when it gets the most interesting. So that's a big plot line for us to follow. But the other
Yeah.
one that's kind of going on for most of the series is that schism between the Jedi, where
Mm.
Luke's faction is kind of going against Kip's faction. And I do think that the series does kind of struggle to set up what exactly Luke and Corran are going for, like what their position really is.
You
Uh,
know why though? Like, sorry, continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, go ahead.
I think the reason why there's such a struggle with this is because a book and this is something that Star Wars has struggled with a lot, in my opinion. A book where a Jedi is like a Jedi should be is not a very interesting book to
Yeah,
read, I don't think. You know, like Star Wars, it feels like it's always in this tug of war of Jedi doing these Jedi things, and then also wanting to be an action series. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Um, and this book is, I feel like, really struggling with that. Um, and it's something that I think a lot of people rightfully point to kind of issues with the later series, Legacy, Swarm War through Fate of the Jedi and
yeah,
beyond. Um, and like the Sword of the Jedi probably would have made that even worse had that came out. And I honestly like, and we will get into that philosophy as well in later on, certainly in Trader when they talk about kind of what is being a Jedi. But I do think like this has kind of existed since, Return of the Jedi, where Luke chooses not to fight Vader. And whether you like The Last Jedi or not, and I certainly have a lot of issues with that movie, like I think that was that was another really good way to portray how to be a Jedi.
Mhm.
And it's sometimes a lot less exciting, especially when there's this big war going on.
Yeah, like they put a lot of emphasis on the difference between like offense and defense, which I think is a fair point. Like it gets to
Mhm.
the point that attacking like active Yuuzhan Vong military units gets put as too offensive.
Yes.
And that's like, okay, you're not really going for that.
Mhm.
And so in a few places it ends up being almost portrayed that the fundamental difference between Luke's side and Kip's side is whether or not you're being a dick at that moment.
Mhm.
Like that ends up being the only way that they can really portray who's going too far in what way. Because like is it never seems like Luke and Corrin are actually saying we shouldn't do anything about the Vong. But then when they try to
Mhm.
highlight the differences at points where it's uh, less relevant to the discussions
Mhm.
where it's not just the two groups talking to each other, once they get to the practical elements of it, then when they try to put the conflict into those, it turns into like, oh, but now if you kill Shy, he's or if you fight the Vong here, then you've pulled them into action. Like they were
Who
gonna attack
cares?
anyways. Like
Yeah,
we knew this was happening. You're preempting their murder of a trillion people
exactly.
there.
Yeah, you're right. Luke feels a little off the money here, where Corrin at the end, I feel like, kind of has his head a little more straight, where he's like,
Yeah,
fighting Shade Shy was fine. Where I am starting to go wrong is that I enjoyed it at the end
yeah,
because he's got a killing blow that he can lay against Shade Shy, and he waits just a second, basically to say "fuck you" to Shade Shy for like because he was the one who killed Elagos, Corrin's friend, and he's kind of realizing that's where things are wrong, which
yeah.
I think is probably maybe a bit more. Uh,
Yeah, like it starts out in Vector Prime where it's laid out pretty well, and
mhm.
then it kind of loses track of what the conflict is a little bit in this book in particular. Then
Yeah.
it does get back on track by the end of it with Corin, and I
Hmm.
actually do like a lot of what's going on with Jason
Hmm.
so far, where you
He's being
see
pulled.
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you see enough of what's going to happen to him later, even if that's not planned yet, and
Hmm.
like where his sympathies are lying, but he also, when they have that moment where they're all supposed to say what's holding them back from unifying with the forest, he basically says that his problem is that he's worrying too much about what he's going to be in the future,
Hmm.
which is it's a good moment to hit him with the Yoda line.
Yeah. Focus on the present, or the Qui-Gon line from Episode 1. Be
Yeah,
mindful of, I forget what exactly he says when they're on the Trade
the
Federation
living
ship, but
force,
yeah,
but
exactly.
always never his mind on where he was, what he was doing.
Yeah, just aggressively poking him in the chest. It's fucking talons.
I do think that kind of like end runs Jason's problems for the moment, but it doesn't fundamentally solve what his issue is, which is less like what's he's going to be in the future. That's part of
Hmm.
it, but it's also
Hmm.
like what should he be doing right now, which is the bigger part of his problem up uh through Traitor and Destiny's Way.
Yeah, and I mean it makes sense. He is getting pulled in a lot of directions here. Just like because he's had to do some shit that's really confusing. And it's also confusing. I think it's got to be confusing for him to see Jaina, who's and not just Jaina, but also Corrin in a way too, who he's trying to make the distinction. Oh, so you're not a Jedi anymore? When Corrin basically kind of rejoins the military, and Corrin's like, "What are you talking about? I'm still a Jedi. I'm just like that. You never stop being a Jedi."
Yeah.
Um, and he's got no clue what to do, and it's also a bit weird because Jaina's in this role where she is very aggressively killing people. She's using the Force, and she's kind of loving it at the same time. So
Yeah, like Jaina is the only one who kind of stays on some sort of fixed path. Like she has her dark journey, but then she kind of gets back to where she was, and there's the first time she sees Jag in this book. There's a few lines from like Jason and Jaina where it's like, yeah, the military should be telling everyone what to do all the time.
Yeah, but then Corin talks about like how hot is it Ganner? He talks about how hot he is to Jaina. I was like, maybe
Yeah.
maybe you shouldn't allow 16-year-old women in the military. Actually,
Yeah, that's like the early part where they're getting prepared for their mission, I think. And Corin
yeah,
comes up while they're having their coffee. He's like, anyone else want to bang Ganner?
Almost definitely. Yeah.
Ganner wants to bang Ganner.
Yeah. Although, of course, Ganner has his famous moment in this one where he becomes less of a dick because he gets scratched up.
Yeah, I think it was weird that they had to throw in that he was listening to Pain by 3 Days Grace when Jason walked in.
Yeah, and then he walks in later and Jason's listening to Vindicated by, I don't even know.
Dashboard Confessional.
Yeah. That'd be a fun thought project. Which like cheesy rock song would everyone be listening to during the Vong War? Luke's a big yacht rock guy for sure.
I think Chalco from this book would be like Mr. Blue Sky or something.
I think Chalco would be Laying Pipe by, I think it's Dave Wilcox. Just like just working man, like laying pipe all night long, got to satisfy that woman.
It's not Maynor just Angela all along from WandaVision.
Yeah, maybe. I'm just looking to see if I have any other notes about this book. We get Errol Num. She was one of the original Rogue Squadron pilots. She's mentioned as an admiral now, so good for her.
Yeah. I think she's the one that got another chance. Like she didn't get like a do-over. She got the ship another chance.
Yeah.
So she transitioned in Rogue Squadron to being like captain for all that, and then became an admiral.
There was a few other references I noticed like that. One was they talk about I didn't realize this, but the Ithorian who was leading Ithor before the current leader. He's named dropped a few times. So I was like, who is this guy? Of course, he's the Ithorian in the Mos Eisley Canteen in episode 4. I didn't know that, but like, of course he is.
He matured from his days of getting blasted on Tatooine. So yeah, I found I did put a note with Jaina meeting Jag. Yeah. And so the line was, she admired the way he'd stood up to the New Republic's politicians, most of whom disgusted her because of the way they treated her mother. Even the imperial formality was attractive in a quaint sort of way. So the note I gave her was Junta Fel, but that's not how you pronounce the word, but I still thought it was funny at the time.
Yeah, that is good. Yeah, the Empire famously treated Princess Leia very, very well throughout history.
We just need the strong military to tell everyone what to do. It's very sensible.
Speaking of military, another thing I was wondering, did the Soontir Fel clones get the mobilization order from Palion?
You'd have to assume they're included in that, right?
Yeah, unless
Thrawn didn't have access granted to all of them. Like that might have just been a thing that Israel discovered.
Well, I'm remembering like during the novels, like, or the Thrawn duology, that like they help Han. Part of that's to keep anonymous, so maybe they get moved over to like the KIA call. Although I guess those are Imperial records, so
well, what's their that
sleeper cell?
That cell, I think, like officially joins the New Republic.
Okay.
But they're everywhere. There's Soontirs, there's Veers, they're all over the place. And the fact that like it went out to Soontir in the Empire of the Hand, like that's even more top secret than the
Devis. That was a bit strange. Like how the Empire in the Hand is kind of just It would have been nice to see the Empire of the Hand have their own Star Destroyer show up, I guess.
They get that later on, but like the
Yeah.
handling of the Empire of the Hand is going to get even weirder
Yeah, where they're just going to
throughout.
become like the Chiss, basically.
Well, not even just that. Like it's not just because I'm a big Empire of the Hand fan or something, but like in certain places they get treated as if they're just part of the Empire. In certain places
Hmm.
they're treated as if
Yeah.
they're just part of the Chiss. That also
Hmm.
causes problems because it sometimes ends up being treated as if the Chiss are therefore just part of the Empire. Even
Yeah.
though it's like three distinct groups, the Empire of the Hand
Yeah.
does get a little absorbed by the Chiss, but the Chiss had no interest in ruling a bunch of other species in the unknown regions. Like
Yeah.
they would have, no one wants that. So it just doesn't work
Yeah.
on any of
That's
those
what I
levels.
find. I find the Thrawn duology a little disappointing when you read it, kind of knowing how things are going to turn out, because the Empire of the Hand is such an interesting setup, but they never really get their full payoff. Um, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, I think it only ends up getting paid off in any implied way if you take like Jag becoming chief of state of the Empire as kind of a unification between the Empire of the Hand and the Empire for the Fell Empire later on, like
Yeah. Yeah.
as if
Fair
that's
enough.
all one state at that point, but they don't end up
Hmm.
doing anything on their own, so that's more of a separation from the Chiss. Like
Hmm.
you have all the Empire of the Hand people talking as if they've been in Chiss society, and like you have Soontir on Chilla all the time.
Hmm.
So at least the Imperial leadership maybe got eaten up into the Chiss for a while, and then Jag like reactivates them. But like it's more of a loose military confederation or something. Maybe like a sleeper NATO. It turns into, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, another kind of interesting thing with the Empire of the Hand is it seems this book kind of implies they've actually been engaged with the Vong for like actively engaged with them for some
Yeah,
time now. They're holding the flank, I think, is what Palion says, which is I don't know if that doesn't really seem to fit kind of the overall
yeah.
picture I get of the war.
Like the Empire of the Hand gets introduced in Vision of the Future as like the whole, oh, there's so many threats out here, which does leave some wiggle room for them to be fighting other stuff. And
Hmm.
there are enough other mentions of Vong coming into places like that the idea that they're maybe fighting a few Vong picket fleets every so often
Hmm.
wouldn't be super out of the question. Like there is 4,000 years worth of Vong showing up in other places because there's like uh, we know they're hanging around outside the galaxy for a while because they're having their own little
Hmm.
uh, fight between like Shimra and Quariel. Which
Hmm.
the first time I read the series, I didn't realize Quariel was the guy's name, so I thought it was like Quo Realis. So are they realists who believed in the status quo or what something? But it turned out just to be the guy's name. Uh, but like, there's like a Vong lady who's on Lord 4,000
Hmm.
years before Yavin as well. It's kind of messy.
Yeah, totally messy. Um, oh well, way it goes, I guess.
Way of the road.
Any Yeah, way the road. Pissing in bottles in the extragalactic journey to the galaxy. Way the road.
Yeah.
Anything else about the book that you wanted to bring up or talk about?
No, I think that's my thoughts on Dark Tide Ruin. Do you have
Do you
a
like
rating you'd like to give? Oh,
I was gonna say, do you like the dual phase lightsaber action we get in this?
I do. I don't know why it has to change color. That just makes it
Yeah.
harder to put an Empire at War.
Yeah, for sure. A rating for this one. I definitely like this one less than the prior one. I might have given Onslaught an A. Um hmm. I don't know if I want to give this one a B or a C.
I'm in the same boat there.
Which one's our average again?
Right now I think C and D. No, I think C is the like the middle. I guess other than yeah,
I might give this one a C, I think. I quite liked
yeah,
it, but yeah, just average for
yeah. I
me.
think it sounded like we're both harder on the book than we actually are. C is our mode right now as well, and we're very top
Hmm.
heavy on our rankings.
Hmm.
I don't think it's an insult to the book or Mister Stackpole
No, no.
to give it a C. Yeah, last time you gave Onslaught an A, I believe, and I gave it a B.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we're dropping down to the C's for both of us. Because I'm just thinking about like what's coming, and there are a lot of books that because I've read the series very recently as well.
Yeah.
A lot of the other books that I just enjoyed more than this, and I think that makes sense.
I find the endings pretty contrived as well. I mean, even not just the fact that it's a duel for the planet, but like the fact that the Vong just kind of cut and run and then get blasted, but also we should have mentioned this too. It's called the burning of Ithor because they basically destroy it with like chemicals. So
Yeah,
not
well,
great.
they destroy it twice because like first you have the problem of they've sent in this biohazard to eat the entire world. It's like, it's already destroyed there. And I was like, do I need to go downstairs? Did I misremember the book and change
Nope.
the stream title? But no, they burn it afterwards. They do that and then they ignite the gases from it. So just in case
Well,
there was any.
I was unclear. Aren't the gases kind of ignited because the New Republic destroys the Shadow Shy's flagship and
Yeah,
it
the
crashes? Yeah.
Legacy of Torment's on fire and then dips into
Yeah.
the atmosphere.
Yeah. Shit's on fire. Yeah. So really, the New Republic kind of does it to themselves.
So does that mean that Trace song is Drops of Jupiter? Or would that be Mama Nadon? Or no, whatever the new Ithorian's name is.
Mm,
That
yeah, I feel
she's
like.
back in the
Yeah,
atmosphere.
I feel like that's pretty appropriate, actually. Or something about loving plants. I don't know. They do be liking their plants.
Rusted Root? Oh no,
Yeah.
is that the band or is that the song? Oh, it's Send Me on My Way by Rusted Root. Never mind. Okay, so we got a bunch of questions between our last few episodes. I've picked out some of the ones that are most related to this book, and then we'll, because next week's not going to be a book week, we'll have more time to go through some of the other ones and any that we get sent to tapcaftransmissions@gmail.com. See how I work that in. But our first question for this week is from Matrix, who says, I know that in Outbound Flight there were references to the Vong invading through Palpatine's vision of Maul fighting one in Darth Maul Lockdown, but do you believe there could have been other Praetorate Vong during the 1,000-year span between the last Sith Wars and the Clone Wars? Also, how long do you theorize it took them to travel between galaxies using their limited resources? We touched on this a little bit a couple minutes ago.
I mean, there's definitely some because that one on Bimial was before the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there were many others kind of incognito throughout the galaxy.
Because I think the way they present it is like it's taking a while, especially for some of the bigger world ships to get there. So these smaller detachments were able to keep going, and sometimes they'd have to like rest. So
yeah, it's the way I kind of imagine it. Like I see it as being like a 10,000-year journey, like a very, very, very long time. And the world ships stuck together for most of it, and then kind of because there is one during the Old Republic, perhaps that showed up, and then I think at some point probably there were several advanced fleets because you hear about these big like histories along the way. You know, there are generations, maybe 10,000 years is too much, but it seems like it was a very, very long time.
Yeah,
between galaxies because they are essentially just traveling not through hyperspace in their world ships. So
yeah, and we know that like the Abominor and everything, the rest of the machine species from their galaxy got there long before they did. So name is Seacot got there before they did. They were going very slow on this whole journey. But
yeah, and their ships were like they were losing ships. I imagine they were. I don't know if they were in the original world ships. Probably, I guess I don't know, but it also seems like they may have made some stops along the way. I believe there's some references to them conquering other.
Yeah, it's unclear if the Chazrek are from their original galaxy or someone they conquered on the way.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like they left their galaxy and headed straight for the Star Wars galaxy either. Like they didn't. I don't think they really necessarily had a galaxy in mind when they started. So all the scouting plays into that as well. But one thing that we that was interesting or cool with the duel is like the book opens with the sparring between
Oh yeah.
Mara and Corrin and them,
Hmm.
and he's basically practicing the trick that he uses to kill Shai later on,
Hmm.
and everyone's doubtful that it's actually useful for anything.
Chekhov's lightsaber
Yeah,
technique.
nice call forward. There
Yeah.
was also the thing at the Jedi meeting where Kip is at the podium and tells Luke, "Hey, you wanna come use this maybe so it can be easier to hear you?" And Luke's
Hmm.
like, "No, you should all trust what you hear with the Force in your heart." Like, come on,
Like
man,
what?
use your words, sir.
Yeah, Luke's just an absolute boomer. Not in the ways that matter.
He's
At this
struggling to
point,
turn on the microphone.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Luke's he's basically like the Christian camp counselor, who's like for some reason been dragged into now leading a war effort, like the youth pastor.
That's more Ikrit.
Yeah, fair enough. And he just dies.
Did your youth pastor not explode? I never had one.
No, I didn't either. No, my parents, my parents allowed me to be sinners. That's why we had kids
Yeah.
before we were married. My wife and I.
My
But
dad
yeah,
was Catholic, my mom was Protestant, so I became an atheist at a very early age once my cousins told me I was going to hell.
I basically decided I want to go to church when my mom would take us sometime. We just went to the United Church, which is like the
Yeah.
least crazy thing ever. But when we went, my dad would always be home, and he would just be like eating hash browns and like watching like Sunday morning like TV. And I was like, this seems way better.
Yeah,
So
I actually did that with my grandpa because like my dad stopped going to church after he married my mom. My
mhm.
mom stopped going to church because like the whole interfaith stuff, even though it's Catholic to Protestant, not a huge jump there, but hey, they just didn't have anywhere to go, then they fell
less
off.
theses. Yeah.
But then I just I was at my grandparents' house once, and my grandpa was uh watching a church service on TV. He's like, "This is at least better than church," so I'm glad I didn't go with grandma.
Yeah, my version of that was kind of like aside from the just like on Christmas Eve, my dad and my grandmother would get drunk at home, and my mom and her mom would go to church. So I was like, especially when I was older, it's like not hard to choose which way I wanted to go.
Yeah,
Become the degenerate drinker and have fun, or no, my
all
parents
right.
aren't degenerates, but my grandmother was. Anyway,
Our next question comes from Joel, who says, "So how far would you say the Empire is being portrayed in this, or how would you say the Empire is being portrayed in these stories?" Actually, we pretty much talked about this at
yeah, I think we covered
length.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there you go. Thank you, Joel and Matrix. Next question is from Rocking Lemon, who says, "First time questioner, long time listener, was curious on your opinion on the minimalist versus maximalist positions in both canon and legends. I've personally seen both in legends depending on the source, with the Vong books you're currently reading much more maximalist, while many older books were more scarce on numbers for ships. With canon, it seems like they've taken the more minimalist position, especially with what I saw in Alphabet Squadron books, where the flagship for Hera wasn't a Clamber for the longest time."
Yeah, for one, that's the Lodestar, and I actually thought the Lodestar was fine, especially
Yeah.
where she does get the Star Destroyer upgrade later.
Yeah, that's very, very soon after Endor. And they're
Yeah,
working on, like, in the middle of that, she's going and passing certification for a Starhawk, too. So it's,
yeah, she gets a Starhawk license. Um, yeah, I think it's most apparent in Legends, and definitely in some of the Bantam stuff. I kind of like how I don't like the overly kind of Curtis Saxton like kilojoules of or terajoules of laser power shooting ships from light years away. Like I don't like that. I don't find the need to like have the universe be such that it wins online debates about like which faction is stronger,
yeah.
which is very 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 important to a lot of people. Um, but I, it, I, I do find if I'm going to be bothered by one of the two, I'm usually bothered by the minimalist one where it's like the New Republic has 6 ships
Yeah.
and they're all somewhere else, so they're about to lose Coruscant or whatever.
Yeah, like I think NJO usually handles it pretty well. Like there's some swinging from author to author and from story to story, but like
Yeah.
ultimately they're there to serve a narrative purpose, and I think NJO
Mhm.
usually nails that pretty well. And
Yeah.
like there's never really a it's not too big of an issue in NJO where there will be a fleet battle happening that feels like, oh, this should have been much bigger, this should have been much smaller.
Yeah, I feel like the numbers in this one make sense. They actually do get specific fleet numbers. There's 4 Star Destroyers, and I think 8 Victories plus support ships, and
Yeah.
a Mon Cal cruiser with, I think, reinforcements pending. And for Ithor, where like the galaxy is not fully mobilized yet, it felt about right to me.
Yeah, like if I were trying to project it into a real galaxy or something,
Mhm.
obviously forces get much bigger, just
Yeah.
because like the amount of resources available, even just comparing it to what like the size of a navy on Earth looks like.
Hmm.
Uh, but that tends to not work as well for narratives when you're trying to make like, oh, this clutch moment from this starfighter pilot kills the
Yeah.
enemy capital ship, and then something cool happens, which is ultimately a lot more important than uh setting up the world to exist in an external reality.
Yeah, like that's 100% true. Star Wars has kind of this issue as well, where like it will talk the talk, the 25,000 Star Destroyers, the 100,000 systems in the Republic or whatever. But everyone knows Han Solo, the chimeras everywhere, and it's just
Yeah.
kind of gotta roll with it. I do like how they mentioned that.
The leader
The,
of the resistance on Garki is Corin's ex-girlfriend's son.
yeah, exactly. I do like how we are getting reasons why like we're not seeing 100 Star Destroyers attack the Vong, is because they're attacking right down kind of the political fracture point within
Yeah.
the Empire.
It is kind of
And
weird that it almost presented it if Raw Roost is the only thing happening on the Outer Rim for a while, but then you do get like, oh, this is Raw Roost's support
Mhm.
ship. So there's at least the implication that other stuff is going on, and you can mentally fill that in to be whatever you want,
Yeah,
which is what
especially
it really
like
needs to be.
the Essential Guide to Warfare does that, where like
Yeah.
it gives you more details about like the defense of Mon Calamari, for example, where it's like there were like 3 dreadnoughts there the whole time, which
Yeah.
like yeah, that feels right when it comes to scale. Um, One thing I'm noticing in this book is, especially in really these first books, is the Vong are taking a lot of losses at this point.
Yeah.
Especially kind of with the knowledge that their invasion falters partially because they're not able to replace their soldiers. They're losing a lot of soldiers. So,
Yeah, like Legacy of Torment is not a minor ship, and they lost a one of the smaller world ships, I think, at
mm-hmm.
in the
Alcadan,
earlier
or
books, like at Cernputner
no,
at
it's at
Helska.
Helska. Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah,
they're not the biggest ships, but they are quite large. They're quite important. Like Legacy of Torment was,
it's like a superstar
uh,
destroyer.
yeah, it was a bunch of the smaller cruisers grafted together. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
the one that looks like a mushroom colony, where
Yeah,
each of them is actually its own ship. But they're all turned into one. But
yeah,
that's a side point.
yeah.
But
They
yeah,
talk
like
about
these
its
are big.
skeleton.
Yeah, these are big losses they're taking, and
Mm-hmm.
they've still all got to get in there.
Yep, yep. They're basically like it's like you got 3 of the boys in the club, and the rest are waiting outside, and like Joe's already fallen asleep and got kicked out.
Yeah,
Not a great start.
classic Joe.
Yep. Joe is me. I'm Joe.
I thought we were talking about Biden.
No.
All right. Well, anything else you want to put on the docket for today? I guess we need to say what we're doing next week as well.
Did we decide what we're doing next week?
We haven't officially. I was going to say we have the opportunity of doing another question episode. We have Halo that we could talk about.
Is it the series finale? No, I think series finale is the week after next.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So
So maybe not Halo.
we're going to be talking about the next Yuuzhan Vong book in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I always want to call it Edge of Victory. It's not Edge of Victory. It's the James Luceno ones, I'm pretty sure.
Is that? Oh, I have no idea which book is next. I think it is James Luceno next.
Yeah.
And I believe the intro says, "You're up next, Jim." There's a funny little intro at the beginning of the book.
Hey, yo, Jim, let him in.
Hey, yo, Jim, let him in, let him in. Yeah, the Vong are coming. Hey, yo, Jim, let him in, let him in.
I don't know why so Edge of Victory and James Lucino's I always flip.
Yeah, I'm not even gonna guess which is next, but
It's Agents of Chaos.
Agents of Chaos. Okay. What to do next week? We probably should have talked about this.
There's also comics we could go into.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's like any short stories or anything as well.
All right, maybe we'll talk about this.
We'll figure it out
off air.
Yeah,
we'll try to have an
figure it
answer. We'll tweet it out by Sunday what we're going to be doing.
Yeah.
Probably earlier, but I'm giving us room to forget. Either way, and maybe you can edit it into the actual
I'll edit it into the
episode.
beginning of the podcast. Yeah.
So that is going to do it for this week's edition of Tapcaf Transmissions. We'll be back on a regular schedule for the foreseeable future. So next week we'll have whatever we're talking about. Then the week after that, we are going to have Agents of Chaos 1, and we'll continue on the Vong War from there. But
hopefully things turn around and everything's okay.
I have some bad news about how this is going for. There's still 16 books to go.
Yeah, I mean, diplomacy seemed like it was on the right path, right? They're going to work it out.
We've got 2 out of 3 major deaths out of the way. Are there more than 3 major deaths? Major deaths being characters who existed before NJO. But I think we're
Mara and Luke's sleeping patterns as they get the new baby.
Mm-hmm. Did that happen here though? Is that what was it? Ithor where they made a little Ben?
Kind of seemed like it, didn't it?
We'll have to keep track of that timing. We got a Winter and Akbar sighting coming up ahead. A lot to look forward to is the point. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening. Remember to leave reviews on all of your favorite podcast platforms, and